we would get together and buy community cemetery plot and be with each other throughout eternity. I said, I'm not happy to be with you now. He said, it's for the benefit of the temple. I said, I'll take a double. Now I got 16 graves. I got to look for friends. Well, I'm going to do it. I go down to the Englewood Country Club, which I was a member in those days. So I had a few gins. And Foster says, Barty, Joey, Dick, we should get together, buy property. We have investment. I said, how would you guys like to get in on some land I got? I get him in a car, drive him to Cedar Grove Cemetery in Paramus. I said, there it is. I think it's a big laugh. They don't laugh. They look at me. Foster says, Barty, I think you blew your money. You bought in a dead neighborhood. Okay. So I said to the guy, okay, just put up a sign on my piece of ground. Coming. Buddy Hackett and friends.
Good morning. It's Friday, Fight Song Friday, January the 16th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer, the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, meditation, motivation, and the Cold War. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Stu Varney up next.
And most importantly, I'll be speaking with the president, Donald J. Trump, in Davos next week. He will unveil those major announcements on housing and potentially 401ks, and he will also talk about how he is efforting America to be affordable once again with his ban on purchasing single-family homes, his purchases of mortgage-backed securities, and a lot more. Join us for all of our exclusives next week, including my interview with President Trump. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Sending it right over to Varney and Company. Stu, take it away.
All right, good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. It was another violent night in Minneapolis. The president has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act and bring in federal troops. That did not stop another pitched battle at the ICE detention center. 3 illegal Venezuelan migrants arrested in connection with the beating of an ICE agent with a snow shovel. A demonstration by patriots who support ICE raids, that is planned for this weekend in Minneapolis. The administration is beefing up our military presence in the Mideast. An aircraft carrier is on its way. The president has threatened to take action if Iran continues its massacre of civilians. Now, there are reports that armed thugs are walking the streets of Tehran, shooting people who go outside. That comes to us from General Jack Keane. He's going to be on the show later. Let's get to the markets. Not much movement for the Dow and the S&P. Up 16 Dow, up 11 S&P. But look at that NASDAQ, up nearly a half percentage point. That's a solid gain based on a new deal between the U.S. and Taiwan, which cuts tariffs and brings a huge investment in computer chips to the United States. Bitcoin, I'll call it solid at $95,000 a share, 95.4. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, that's right around 419, 420, 419 right now. And the 2-year, it's well above 3.5% at 358. Oil, $60 a barrel. Just over. Gas still averaging around $2.80, $2.83 right now. On the show today, a top Democrat has a plan to revitalize the party. David Plouffe, he's a 3-time presidential campaign manager. He says the party is in crisis and will lose in 2028 if they don't change soon. He says the left can't just bash Trump, but his plan still calls for bashing the rich. The New York City economy is in trouble. Just as the new mayor takes over, thousands of businesses closing, jobs scarce. It's hard to see how Mandani's anti-business program could turn things around. But that's not stopping socialism's march through the Democrat Party. It's Friday, January the 16th, 2026.
And that was Varney and Company, Non-Profit News Now. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
Every successful person has the habit of doing the things failures don't like to do.
Successful people do what they have to do, whether they feel like it or not. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if you're overwhelmed. You find out a fucking way to overcome that challenge, and you make that shit happen. Productivity is never an accident. If you do it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, every single day, if you keep grinding, you will make your dreams a reality. But you gotta be obsessed with it.
I need you to know that the stuff that you want, millions of people want the same thing you want and will never get it. So why, you, and how? Only one way. Total immersion. Become a freak. Guys, I want to crack you open, and I want to see that you're crazy. Because only crazy people make it.
Why are you staying on the basketball court so much? Because I'm trying to get it. Why are you out there practicing in the hot sun when ain't nobody else out there? Because I'm trying to get it. The more weird you are is a reflection of how committed you are to focusing on your molding and shaping and developing your ideas and your craft so that when it's time for you to make your rounds, you're going to fly.
I used to be upset because I wasn't getting where I wanted to get to, and then I realized you're not devoted to it. You're not giving 120%. You need to devote, which means you get all your energy, all your time, all your resources to a specific thing. You cut everything off. Focus.
Dive into something with more passion, with more dedication than you have ever done in your entire life.
You need to work the hours no one else is willing to. You need to study harder than anyone else is willing to. You need to put more effort in on that project than anyone else would even think to. Because you're not aiming to meet people's expectations. You're aiming to amaze them. You can only become the best by outworking everybody else. Your level of dedication determines how far you will go.
You have to develop yourself and keep improving your game when everybody else is taking time off, relaxing.
It is the days you don't feel like doing it, but you look at your wife, you look at your kids, you look at the country, and you realize that I am where I am because of other people's sacrifice. I gotta get up and make it happen, even though I don't want to get up and make it happen.
To live the life only 1% of people do, you have to do what 99% of people won't. If you don't like where you are right now, turn around and look at what you've done. You've built every single step to create this. No accidents. Just taking the easy road too many times, not getting up, not going for that extra rep, putting that extra mile in, the little inches of life that add up to be first place or forgotten.
The only thing you do for success is sweat, it's blood, it's tears. There are no shortcuts to success. Stop thinking there are. And stop wanting people to put you somewhere you didn't earn. You want the lifestyle, but you don't want to earn it. You gotta earn this. There is a price tag to greatness. You will have to work for every single thing you get. And you gotta work every single day. I need specifics. What are you doing on Monday? What are you doing on Tuesday? What are you doing on Wednesday? If you're going to get your personal freedom, you gotta go get it.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. So the Iranian situation, there's an article in the American Thinker, what does it say? Iran's mullahs, a Trump promise made is a Trump promise kept. And you got to remember that everything, even around the world, is conservatives versus liberals. And that's the way it is in Iran as well. Remember that it is that the mullahs, the people that are being portrayed now as the evildoers in Iran, were supported by the likes of President Obama and President Joe Biden, both liberals. And they supported them because they see in the mullahs revolutionary potential. And Biden and Obama, they want their socialist revolution. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I noticed is you have this uprising in Iran, but we had the same thing 50 years ago in 1979. The same people that were cheering on, that are cheering on the revolutionaries this time, were cheering on the revolutionaries in 1979, saying, oh, we got to get rid of the evil Shah of Iran. And then the Iranian people replaced them with something even worse. So I haven't heard anybody in Iran saying, you know what, 1979 was a mistake. We were wrong. And we want to go back to a monarchy. Okay, that makes sense. What I see here is a temper tantrum. I see a bunch of spoiled people who are upset because the economy is in ruins, because the Iranian money the currency is devalued against the dollar. So the buying power is bad, etc. It creates all kinds of problems throughout their economy. That's what if the economy was in good shape, none of these people would be in the street protesting. They couldn't care less. Because again, I don't hear any of them saying, we made a mistake, let's bring back the Shah. Okay? They're just throwing a temper tantrum. They want their money and their economy to be improved. That's what they're looking for. And as far as action on the part of the United States, no. No, we stay out unless Congress wants to have the courage to give a declaration of war, and then we can invade Iran and go from there. The other thing that I hear so often, too, about foreign policy is the idea of splitting a government in two and saying, well, we support the people, we just don't support the regime. We used to hear that in Iraq all the time. Wow, we hate Saddam Hussein, but the Iraqi people are okay. Well, bullshit. This Iraqi people that put him in power. It is the Iraqi people that installed the system of government they have that allowed him to be in power. Same thing with Iran. It is the Iranian people that created the revolution, that created these mullahs and this theocracy in the first place. So if our beef is with Iran, it's with all of Iran, not just the mullahs. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now one paragraph from the American Thinker called The Art of Demolishing Conventional Wisdom. And I'm going to read the first paragraph as written and then the paragraph as it should have been written. I make no bones about my support for President Trump. I find him a breath of truth-infused fresh air in an age of pretending that has long been dedicated to constructing, spreading, and anointing the narrative. By rejecting the rules of political correctness, Trump is willing to say what others will not. By rejecting conventional wisdom, the president approaches challenges in insightful ways. By rejecting the authority of institutions compromised by political agendas, President Trump challenges corrosive policies camouflaged as expertise. All right, and now the edit. I make no bones about my support for conservatism. I find it a breath of truth-infused fresh air in a liberal age of fiction that has long been dedicated to constructing, spreading, and anointing the narrative. By rejecting liberal political correctness, conservatism is willing to say what liberals will not. By rejecting liberal wisdom, conservatives approach challenges in insightful ways. By rejecting liberal institutions compromised by political agendas, conservatives challenge liberal policies camouflaged as expertise. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Cold War.
August 1950. The Korean peninsula is sweltering under a suffocating blanket of humidity and dust. The scent of pine resin mixes with the heavy, oily stench of unburnt diesel fuel. On the dusty roads leading south toward the Pusan perimeter, the ground trembles. This is not the tremor of an earthquake, but the rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat of the Korean People's Army. They are pushing forward, an unstoppable red tide that has swept down from the 38th parallel, crushing everything in its path. At the vanguard of this iron fist sits the pride of the communist bloc, the 3485 tank. For the crew inside the lead tank of the 105th Armored Brigade, the war has been a series of easy victories. Commander Lieutenant Pak peers through his periscope, his eyes scanning the ridgeline near the Naktong River. He feels invincible. And why shouldn't he? For weeks, his unit has rolled over American positions as if they were speed bumps. The intelligence briefings were clear. The Americans were soft. They were unprepared. But most importantly, their equipment was garbage. Pak knows the American arsenal better than they know it themselves. He knows that the American bazooka rounds bounce off the sloped frontal armor of his 34 tank like hail off a tin roof. He knows that the American M24 Chaffee light tanks are nothing more than aluminum coffins, exploding at the mere sight of his 85mm main gun. The Soviet advisors had promised them that nothing in the American infantry could touch the frontal armor of a 34. They were the kings of the road. But on this humid morning, the physics of the battlefield are about to change. Pack orders his column to halt. Something feels wrong. The valley ahead, a narrow choke point surrounded by rice paddies and low hills, is too quiet. The birds have stopped singing. The crickets are silent. There is a metallic taste in the air. He traverses the turret, scanning the tree line 300 meters away. He sees nothing but shadows and heavy foliage. Driver, forward, slow speed, Pack commands. The 34 lurches forward, its tracks grinding the dry earth. Then, it happens. There is no screech of a dive bomber. There is no telltale roar of a heavy artillery barrage. There is only a sharp, violent crack, like a thunderclap, occurring inside a steel drum. 50 meters to Park's right, the number 2 tank in the formation violently shudders. A shower of sparks erupts from the upper glacis plate, the thickest, most heavily sloped armor on the tank. For a split second, the tank continues to roll forward, momentum carrying it on. Then, a catastrophic fire erupts from the commander's hatch. The ammunition cooks off, sending the turret spinning into the air. Park is frozen. His brain cannot process what he just saw. The 34 is supposed to be immune to frontal fire from anything the Americans have on the ground. "Ambush! Reverse! Reverse!" he screams into the intercom. But the enemy is invisible. Another crack echoes through the valley. This time, the tank behind him takes a hit. The projectile doesn't just penetrate. It punches through the engine block and exits the rear, turning the engine compartment into a furnace. Panic sets in. This is impossible. "Where is it coming from?" the gunner yells, slewing the turret frantically. "The ridge, 11 o'clock, Pack shouts, spotting a brief flash of muzzle gas dissipating in the humidity. He squints, trying to identify the killer. He expects to see the massive, hulking profile of a heavy tank, maybe the rumored M26 Pershing, the only thing the intelligence bureau said could possibly hurt them. But the silhouette he sees emerging from the camouflage netting is confusing. It is tall. It is boxy. It has a high profile. It looks like a Sherman. Pack blinks, wiping sweat from his eyes. It is a Sherman, the M4, the obsolete workhorse of the Second World War. The tank that the German Tigers used to eat for breakfast. The tank that Soviet instructors laughed at during training, calling it a grave for 5 brothers. Relief washes over him for a microsecond. If it is just a Sherman, they are safe. A standard 75mm shell from a Sherman cannot penetrate the frontal armor of a 34-85. It is physics. It is a mathematical impossibility. "Target front! It's just a Sherman! Fire!" Park orders, his voice regaining confidence. His gunner fires. The 85mm shell screams across the valley and slams into the American tank's mantlet. Sparks fly. The hit is solid. But the American tank does not explode. It does not stop. It merely rocks back on its suspension, absorbs the blow, and readjusts its aim. Before Pack can order a reload, the muzzle of the American tank flashes again. The sound is different this time. It's a high-pitched scream, a tearing of the air itself. The projectile covers the distance in a fraction of a second, moving faster than any tank shell Park has ever seen. It impacts the turret ring of the 34 next to him. The steel doesn't just bend, it liquefies. The kinetic energy shears the turret clean off the chassis. This is not a normal shell. This is not a normal tank. "Pull back! Smoke! Pop smoke!" Park screams, his voice cracking with genuine terror. The surviving 34 tanks of the column scramble in reverse, their tracks churning up mud as they desperately try to escape the kill zone. They fire blindly into the smoke, terrified of the ghost that is hunting them. As they retreat, Park looks back through the periscope one last time. The American tank is advancing. It moves with a strange fluidity, its suspension eating up the rough terrain. Its gun barrel surprisingly long, tracking them with robotic precision. They were told the Americans were bringing knives to a gunfight. But whatever that machine was, it just swatted the Soviet Union's best armor aside like a toy. Before we analyze the mystery of this lethal new adversary, if you enjoy deep dives into the military history that shaped our modern world, make sure to subscribe to Cold War Impact. We uncover the forgotten stories of the conflict that divided the globe. Now, let's get back to the Naktong River. The retreat is chaotic. The invincible 105th has been bloodied. Back at the forward command post, roughly 5 kilometers behind the front line, the atmosphere is tense. Lieutenant Pak climbs out of his hatch, his uniform soaked in sweat and grease. He is trembling, not from fatigue, but from a shattering of his reality. He has to report this to the colonel, but what can he say? That they were routed by a relic? He finds the battalion commander, Colonel Kim, standing over a map table smoking a cigarette. Kim looks up, expecting a report of another breakthrough. The ridge is taken, Kim asks, his voice flat. No, Comrade Colonel. Pak says, standing at attention, his eyes fixed on the tent canvas. We were repelled. We lost 3 tanks. 2 more are damaged. Kim drops his cigarette. Repelled? By what? Air support? The Americans have no heavy armor in this sector. It was tanks, Comrade Colonel. Park admits quietly. Shermans. Kim stares at him for a long moment, then lets out a short, incredulous laugh. Shermans? You let yourself be beaten by Shermans? Did you forget to load armor-piercing rounds? Did you fall asleep? He steps closer, poking Pak in the chest. The 34 is superior to the Sherman in every way. Armor, gun, mobility. This is cowardice. It was not normal, Comrade Colonel. Pak insists, his voice rising. I saw it. We hit them. The rounds bounced. But they hit us from 800 meters. Through the glacis. Through the mantlet. 1 shot, 1 kill. The projectile, it moved too fast. It was like a laser. Kim narrows his eyes. He is a veteran of the Manchurian campaigns. He knows men panic. But he also knows the sound of genuine fear. Impossible, Kim mutters. The Americans use the 75mm gun. It cannot penetrate you from that range. Unless... Kim grabs his binoculars and walks out of the tent, looking toward the distant smoke rising from the valley. He knows the Americans are desperate. He knows they are rushing everything they have to the Puzan perimeter. Is it possible they have deployed a new weapon? A secret modification? Or is his tank commander hallucinating? Get the recovery vehicle, Kim orders, his voice cold and calculating. We are going to the front. I want to see these super Shermans for myself. And if I find out you fled from a standard M4, you will be shot for desertion. They move out under the cover of the settling dusk. They need to recover the wreckage of the lead tank. They need to inspect the holes. They need to understand what kind of ghost is haunting the Naktong River. Because if the Americans have found a way to make their obsolete steel relevant again, the entire invasion plan is in jeopardy. As they approach the burning hulk of the lead 34, the smell of roasted metal is overpowering. Kim jumps down and climbs onto the scorched chassis of the dead tank. He shines a flashlight on the entry wound. He stops. He runs his gloved finger over the hole. It is small, surprisingly small, but it is punched through 4 inches of sloped hardened steel as if it were paper. There are no jagged edges. It is a clean, surgical puncture. What could do this? Kim whispers to himself. This isn't just a bigger gun. This is something else entirely. The Americans have changed the rules of the game, and the North Koreans don't even know what game they are playing anymore. Night falls over the Pusan perimeter. Under the flickering light of a kerosene lantern, Colonel Kim continues his grim investigation. The wrecked 34 tank is cooling, the metal ticking as it contracts in the night air. The smell is a nauseating mix of burnt rubber and roasted pork. Kim runs his hand over the entry wound on the turret again. It defies logic. Standard American anti-tank doctrines rely on mass. They use big, heavy shells to smash armor. But this is different. The hole is barely larger than a heavy machine gun round, yet it punched through the thickest part of the turret and exited the other side. Bring the caliper, Kim snaps at his aide. He measures the diameter of the hole. 76 millimeters. He frowns. The math doesn't work. The Americans have 76mm guns. They are mounted on the M10 tank destroyers and some later model Shermans. But the Soviet manuals, the Bibles of tank warfare provided by Moscow, were explicit. The standard American 76mm shell, the M62, travels at roughly 790 meters per second. At ranges over 500 meters, it should struggle to penetrate the sloped frontal armor of a 34. But Park's tank was killed from nearly a kilometer away. And the shell went through the armor like a hot needle through wax. Could it be the British? The aide asks nervously. The 17-pounder gun? Kim shakes his head. Intelligence says the British brigade is 20 miles south. This is the American 2nd Infantry Division. They are supposed to be ragtag, poorly equipped. He climbs down from the wreck and looks out into the darkness. The psychological impact of this weapon is already spreading through the ranks. The tank crews, men who walked with the swagger of conquerors just yesterday, are now whispering in huddles. They are talking about the ghost tanks. They are sharing rumors that the Americans have developed a magnetic shell or a railgun. If Kim cannot explain this, morale will collapse. A tank crew that doesn't trust its armor is a defeated crew. The next morning, the mystery deepens. Kim orders a reconnaissance squad to infiltrate the ridgeline overlooking the American assembly area. They need visual confirmation. They need to see the beast that is eating their armor. Corporal Lee, a sharp-eyed scout, crawls through the tall grass, his camouflage blending perfectly with the terrain. He reaches the crest of the hill and raises his binoculars. Below, in a dry riverbed, the American armor is lagering. He sees them. There are 5 tanks. They are unmistakably Shermans. The high, boxy hull is iconic, but as Lee adjusts the focus on his lenses, he notices details that don't match the recognition charts back at headquarters. These Shermans look wider. The tracks are broader, sitting heavier on the ground. The suspension is different. The old Shermans bounced on vertical springs, a rough and rocky ride. These tanks seem to sit on a more complex horizontal suspension system that hugs the terrain. But it is the gun that draws Lee's attention. It is long, much longer than the stubby 75mm guns on the Shermans they destroyed in Seoul. And at the end of the barrel, there is a distinct muzzle brake, a device to reduce recoil. Lee watches as an American crew loads ammunition. He expects to see the standard black-tipped, armor-piercing rounds. Instead, he sees the loader handling a projectile that looks strange. It is lighter. The tip isn't blunt. It is sharp, encased in a strange lightweight shell. He snaps a photograph with his long-range camera. Back at the command bunker, Colonel Kim studies the developed grainy photo. He compares it to the silhouette of the M26 Pershing. It's not a Pershing, it's definitely a Sherman, but it's a Sherman on steroids. Look at the tracks, Kim points out, tapping the photo. 23 inches wide. The standard Mite 4 has 16-inch tracks. This tank floats over the mud. It is more agile. And the gun? The aide asks. It's the 76, Kim mutters. But it's hitting with the force of a 90. How? The answer lies in a skirmish report that comes in an hour later. Another 34 unit, attempting a flanking maneuver near Tabu Dong, engaged a platoon of these wide Shermans. The report is chilling. We fired first, the surviving platoon leader writes. We hit the lead American tank. Our shell bounced off its front. Kim freezes. Bounced? The Sherman was famous for being thin-skinned. A 34-85 should be able to punch through a Sherman's front plate from 2 kilometers away. If their rounds are bouncing, it means the Americans haven't just upgraded the gun. They've upgraded the armor. Or they are angling it differently. The report continues. The American return fire was instantaneous. The velocity was so high we did not see the tracer. It simply arrived. The impact shattered the turret ring. We are not fighting the same tanks we fought in July. The Americans have changed the variables. Kim realizes they are fighting a ghost from the future. The Americans have taken an old chassis, a tractor, essentially, and turned it into a sniper rifle. He slams his fist on the table. The Soviet advisors lied. Or they didn't know. Either way, the 34 is no longer the apex predator of the Korean peninsula. We need to change tactics, Kim announces, his face grim. We cannot trade shots with them at long range. Their gun is faster. Their aim is true. We must draw them in close. Point-blank range, where their velocity doesn't matter. He looks at the map. The bowling alley. A narrow stretch of road near Tabu Dong. It is a canyon of death. High walls. No maneuvering room. We will lure them in here. Kim traces the line on the map. We will attack at night. We will use the darkness to negate their range advantage. And we will see if these Super Shermans burn just like the old ones. It is a desperate gamble. Kim is betting everything on a night assault. He doesn't know that the Americans are waiting for exactly this. He doesn't know that inside those wide Shermans, the crews are not terrified conscripts. They are veterans. and they have a surprise waiting in the breech of their guns that Kim cannot possibly anticipate. The trap is set, but the mouse is about to realize the cheese is poisoned. August 1950. The sun has vanished behind the jagged peaks of the Sobuksan Mountains, plunging the valley into a suffocating, inky blackness. This narrow corridor of dirt and gravel running north of Taegu is known on the maps as the Tabudong Road, but by tomorrow morning, the American soldiers entrenched on its flanks will have given it a new name, the Bowling Alley. For Colonel Kim, crouching in the command hatch of his 34, the darkness is a weapon. The American Air Force, the vultures that plague them by day, are blind at night. The technological gap is supposed to close when the sun goes down. In the dark, warfare becomes primal. It becomes a knife fight in a phone booth. And in a knife fight, the 34, rugged, simple, and brutal, is the superior blade. Engine off. Listen, Kim whispers into the radio. The column of 1334 tanks sits motionless. The silence is heavy, broken only by the chirping of cicadas and the distant, rhythmic thud of American artillery pounding the hills miles away. Kim is waiting for the sound of movement. He wants to catch the Americans sleeping. Then he hears it. Not the roar of engines, but the clanking of metal. The Americans are repositioning. They are close, less than 400 meters. Driver, start engine, forward, crush them. Kim screams, breaking radio silence. 13 diesel engines roar to life, coughing black smoke into the night air. The North Korean armor surges forward, their headlights flicking on to blind the enemy. This is shock tactics 101. Overwhelm the senses. Close the distance. Ahead, the shapes of the American tanks emerge from the shadows. They are the same wide-tracked monsters, the Super Shermans, blocking the road like sentinels. Fire! Kim commands. The lead 34 fires. The 85mm shell streaks through the dark, missing the lead American tank by inches and slamming into the rock face behind it. The explosion illuminates the valley for a split second. Kim grins. The Americans are sitting ducks. They are stationary targets. But then, the sky turns into day. From the American rear, mortars launch illumination rounds. Star shells burst overhead, drifting down on parachutes, bathing the valley in a harsh, flickering magnesium white light. The shadows vanish. The North Korean tanks are exposed, stark black silhouettes against the white road. And then, the Super Shermans answer. What happens next defies everything Kim understands about tank gunnery. Usually, a tank must stop to fire accurately. The 34 has to brake, let the suspension settle, and then the gunner can aim. It takes precious seconds. But the American tanks begin to move backward, retreating slowly while keeping their front armor pointed at the enemy. And as they move, their guns remain locked on target, floating eerily level as the hull bounces over the rough terrain. Crack! The lead 34, commanded by Kim's most experienced lieutenant, explodes. It doesn't just catch fire, it disintegrates. The turret is blown clear off the ring, cartwheeling into a rice paddy. Crack! Crack! 2 more shots, 2 more kills. The American rate of fire is inhuman. They are firing every 5 seconds, and they aren't missing. Keep moving! Close the gap! Kim yells, his voice straining against the noise. Get inside their guard! A 34 to Kim's left accelerates, charging straight at an American Sherman. It's a suicide run. The North Korean gunner fires on the move, but the shell goes wild, flying high over the ridge. The suspension of the 34 is too stiff. The gun bounces violently with every bump in the road. The American tank doesn't flinch. It reverses slightly, its gun barrel acting like a gyro-stabilized arm. It fires. The projectile hits the charging 34 on the angled frontal armor, the strongest point. Kim watches, expecting the sparks of a ricochet. He expects the physics of the Second World War to save his comrade. Instead, a blinding flash of white sparks erupts on the glacis plate. The shell doesn't bounce. It burrows. The kinetic energy is so immense that the 34 shudders to a dead stop, as if it hit a brick wall. A second later, a jet of flame shoots out of the driver's hatch like a blowtorch. Kim is horrified. What are they shooting? He screams. That is not standard ammunition. The valley floor is now a chaotic light show of red and green tracers. The American red balls are flying straight and true, punching through the Soviet steel with contemptuous ease. The 34 shells, by comparison, seem to lack punch. When they do hit the American tanks, They often glance off the thick, rounded mantlets or the sloped upper hulls. Kim realizes the trap has failed. The Americans aren't trapped in the bowling alley with him. He is trapped in the bowling alley with them. "Driver, hard right, get into the paddies, flank them," Kim orders. His tank lurches off the road, tracks spinning in the mud. He brings his periscope around, trying to find a side shot on one of the Shermans. He spots one, isolated near a burning truck. It's the perfect kill. Target tank, range 300. Fire. His gunner depresses the pedal. The 85mm gun roars. The shell slams into the side of the Sherman. Clang. Kim waits for the explosion. He waits for the fire. But the Sherman just shudders. The shell didn't penetrate. It hit the side, but something, maybe the angle, maybe the internal storage, absorbed the blow. Slowly, terrifyingly, the Sherman's turret begins to rotate toward him. It turns with a smooth electric hum that Kim can almost hear over the battle. The long barrel aligns perfectly with Kim's face. "Reverse! Reverse!" Kim screams, diving down into the turret basket. The Sherman fires. The world turns white. The impact rings the 34 like a giant bell. Kim is thrown against the bulkhead, his ears ringing, blood trickling from his nose. The tank is filled with smoke, but they are alive. The shell hit the turret cheek at an extreme angle and ricocheted. "Bail out! Bail out!" the driver screams. "The fuel lines!" Kim scrambles out of the hatch, tumbling into the wet mud of the rice paddy. He looks back. His tank is not burning yet, but it is dead. The tracks are shattered. He crawls through the muck, the water cold against his chest, as the slaughter continues on the road. He watches as the Super Shermans dismantle his battalion piece by piece. They fight with a mechanical precision that is terrifying. They don't miss. They don't stop. They don't break. From the safety of a drainage ditch, Kim watches the final 34 of his unit try to turn and run. An American shell catches it in the rear engine deck. The tank erupts into a fireball that lights up the entire valley. Silence slowly returns to the bowling alley. The only sound is the crackle of burning diesel and the popping of ammunition cooking off inside the wrecks of the North Korean armor. Kim lies in the mud, humiliated. The 34 was the weapon of the revolution. It defeated the Nazis. It was supposed to liberate the South. But tonight, it was turned into scrap metal by a tank that was supposed to be obsolete 5 years ago. He pulls a piece of shrapnel from his flak jacket. It is a fragment of the American shell that killed his tank. He shines his small flashlight on it. It is dense, incredible dense. And inside the steel jacket there is something else, a core, a hard, dark metal that feels heavier than lead. Kim realizes that the Americans haven't just brought a better tank. They have brought a secret, a technological leap that turned the hunter into the prey. He needs to get this fragment to intelligence. They need to know why the Easy 8 is killing them. They need to know the secret of the silver bullet. The dawn of September 1950 brings no comfort to Colonel Kim. He sits in a dim interrogation room not as a prisoner, but as a man demanding answers from his own intelligence officers. On the metal table between them sits the jagged fragment of the shell that killed his tank. It is the physical evidence of their failure. A senior munitions expert from the Soviet advisory group picks up the fragment. He weighs it in his hand. He scratches the surface with a file. The file slips. The metal is harder than the file. "It is not steel," the expert says, his voice hushed. "This core, it is tungsten carbide." Kim stares at him. "Tungsten? That is a strategic metal. It is incredibly rare. You are telling me the Americans are shooting precious metal at us? They call it HVAP, the expert explains, placing a diagram on the table. High-velocity armor piercing. The designation is M93. This is the first piece of the puzzle. The mystery of the laser velocity is solved. Standard tank shells are heavy slugs of steel. They rely on mass to smash through armor. But the M93 is different. It is a lightweight aluminum body wrapped around a dense, pencil-thin core of tungsten, one of the hardest metals on Earth. Because the projectile is lighter, the gunpowder charge throws it out of the barrel at screaming, speeds up to 3,400 feet per second. Kim realizes why he couldn't see the arc of the shell. There was no arc. At combat ranges, the M93 flies almost perfectly flat. It doesn't smash the 34. It pierces it. The kinetic energy focused on that tiny tungsten tip generates enough heat to liquefy the armor plate upon impact, spraying molten metal into the crew compartment. So they have a magic bullet, Kim mutters. But the tank moved differently. It floated over the ground. It fired while retreating. The Sherman is an old tractor. It shouldn't be able to do that. The intelligence officer pulls out a captured American manual, stamped restricted. He opens it to a schematic of a tank. It is labeled M4A38. They call it the Easy 8, the officer says. It looks like a Sherman, Colonel, but underneath it is a completely different machine. This is the second, and perhaps most devastating, reveal. The North Koreans had been briefed to fight the M4 of 1942, the narrow-tracked, bouncy, thin-skinned tank that struggled in the mud. But the Easy 8 was the final, ultimate evolution of the Sherman platform. The officer points to the suspension system in the diagram. Look here. This is not the vertical spring system we know. This is HVSS, horizontal volute spring suspension. Kim leans in. The diagram shows a complex system of shock absorbers and horizontal springs that allow the road wheels to move independently, soaking up the terrain. This system, the officer continues, allows them to mount tracks that are 23 inches wide. 7 inches wider than the old models. It spreads the weight. It lowers the ground pressure. The pieces fall into place for Kim. That is why they didn't sink in the rice paddies. That is why they could maneuver on the soft banks of the Naktong. But more importantly, the smooth ride provided by the HVSS acted as a poor man's stabilizer. While the 34 bounced and bucked violently, throwing the gunner's aim off with every pebble, the Easy 8 glided. The American gunners weren't superhuman. They were just riding in a limousine while Kim's men were riding in a cart. And the durability, Kim asks. We hit them. They didn't burn. The Sherman is famous for burning. We call them Ronsons. Lights first time, every time. Wet stowage, the officer replies, tapping the whole diagram. The ammunition racks are surrounded by jackets filled with water and glycerin. If we penetrate the ammo rack, the liquid floods the bin and extinguishes the fire before it can explode. They fixed the floor, Colonel. They fixed it 5 years ago. Kim sits back, feeling a cold pit in his stomach. The arrogance of the invasion washes over him. They had invaded, believing they were fighting a museum piece. They thought the 34 was the apex predator because it had sloped armor and a big diesel engine. They ignored the fact that tank warfare is not just about armor thickness, it is about the system. The 34-85 was a revolutionary tank in 1941, but by 1950, it was cramped, blind, and ergonomically a nightmare. There is one more thing, the officer adds, hesitating. The crews. Kim looks up. What about them? We intercepted radio chatter during the battle at the bowling alley. These are not occupation troops. These are not fresh recruits from the States. The officer plays a reel-to-reel tape. The voice cutting through the static is calm, professional, almost bored. It speaks with a southern drawl. Gunner, traverse right. Steady on. Fire. That is the voice of the 70th Tank Battalion, the officer says. And the 72nd. Many of these men fought in Europe. They fought at the Battle of the Bulge. They fought at Remagen. They have lived in these tanks for 5 years. Kim closes his eyes. This is the final nail in the coffin. The 34 has a 2-man turret. The commander has to command the tank, search for targets, talk on the radio, and aim the gun. He is overworked. He is exhausted. When the hatch is closed, he is blind. The Easy 8 has a 3-man turret. The commander commands, the gunner shoots, the loader loads. The American commander has a 360-degree vision cupola. He can see the battlefield. He can spot the 34 before the 34 even knows he is there. And the loader. Inside the spacious hull of the Easy 8, the loader has room to work. He can feed that 76mm gun a new shell every 4 or 5 seconds. Inside the cramped 34, where shells are stored in awkward floor bins, the loader struggles to maintain 6 rounds a minute. In a duel, the American tank fires 2 shots for every one of the North Koreans. And with the tungsten HVAP round, the first shot is all that matters. We lost, Kim whispers. We didn't lose because of numbers. We lost because we underestimated the machine. The Battle of the Bowling Alley was not an anomaly. It was a forecast. In the weeks that followed, the statistics would paint a grim picture. By the end of 1950, the North Korean armored forces, the spearhead that had almost pushed the United Nations into the sea, had effectively ceased to exist. American surveys of the battlefields would later reveal the truth. While air power claimed many kills, the tank-on-tank battles were decisive. The obsolete M4 Sherman, armed with the high-velocity gun and the silver bullet ammunition, was responsible for destroying more 34s than any other tank in the conflict, more than the heavy Pershings, more than the Pattons. The Easy-8 was the perfect weapon for Korea. It was light enough to climb the steep hills that the heavy Pershings couldn't manage. It was reliable enough to run for hundreds of miles without the transmission failing, something the 34 could not claim. And it was deadly enough to punch through the myth of Soviet invincibility. Colonel Kim stands up and walks to the window. Outside, he can hear the distant rumble of the front line moving north. The Americans are breaking out of the Pusan perimeter. The iron fist of the North has been broken against the shield of the Easy-8. He realizes now that the Sherman was never a bad tank. It was a tank designed to be upgraded. It was a platform that could evolve. The Soviets built a tank for a specific moment in 1941. The Americans built a tank that could adapt to the future. And as the sun rises over the smoke-choked peninsula, Kim knows that the war has changed. The mystery of the Naktong River is solved. There were no ghosts. There were no lasers. There was just a group of veteran tankers sitting in a wide-tracked, smooth-riding, rapid-firing machine loaded with the most advanced metallurgy on the planet, waiting for the enemy to make a mistake. And the enemy made the biggest mistake of all. They believed their own propaganda. The 34 is dead. Long live the Easy-8.
And that was the Cold War. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.